Most Americans think World War II was a glorious adventure. This is because the Pentagon teamed up with Hollywood to write and help produce war movies by providing free equipment and extras. The Pentagon has an office in Hollywood to review scripts and offer help to those considered positive, or offer help if changes are made to the script. This can save movie producers millions of dollars per movie, so nearly all agree. Historian Paul Fussell wrote that of the 16 million Americans who served in World War II, only around 1 million were in direct frontline combat, as he was in France. Millions more were in combat zones where they saw destruction, dead bodies, wounded, and prisoners, but didn't face the horror of direct combat. They occasionally had a bomb or artillery round land in their area, but Fussell didn't consider them combat veterans. He said real combat vets wore the combat infantryman badge, which required serving more than 30 days with an infantry unit in combat. Fussell said real combat vets ignored the mostly bogus medals worn on uniforms and only respected the combat infantryman badge. Tales of the American Empire produced The Bloody 1944 Crusade in Europe, link below, about American soldiers in 1944 France. The casualty rate was so high that it was rare to find a soldier who landed on the beaches in Normandy still serving in his unit 6 months later. The U.S. Army had 40 hospital trains and several hospital ships to haul away the wounded. 19,000 American soldiers deserted in Europe, so military police guarded roadways looking for deserters. And a sergeant was added to each combat platoon, who followed it to turn back anyone trying to flee. There was nothing brilliant about American strategy during World War II. Roosevelt and Churchill agreed to let the Soviets fight the Germans until their mighty army was weakened. By 1944, the Germans were in retreat, so the Allies invaded France. They had air superiority and greatly outnumbered the Germans, but fighting was bloody. Despite the chaos of losing the war, the Germans managed to secretly gather several divisions for a massive attack called the 1944 Ardennes Offensive. They launched this offensive after Allied generals openly stated the war would be over in a month. The Germans chose a weak point in the Allied lines. The forested Ardennes was considered easy to defend, so was manned by new units like the U.S. Army's 106th Division. It mostly consisted of green draftees with young officers with just 90 days of training and no combat experience. They were told to expect occasional small German infantry patrols, and few German tanks were known to be in the area. The division's 3 infantry regiments and 4 artillery battalions were expected to defend 22 miles of the front, 3 times more than normal. The division's 81st Combat Engineer Battalion also took over frontline positions. The German offensive is best explained by this old U.S. Army documentary.
Hitler's plan of attack was to break through on the Ardennes with 3 armies. The 6th Panzer Army, led by the butcher from Bavaria, Sepp Dietrich. The 5th Panzer Army, led by Baron Hasse von Manteuffel. And the 7th Army, led by General Brandenburger. They would cross the Meuse River on the 2nd day between Liège and Namur, bypass Brussels, and reach the great port of Antwerp on the 7th day. This operation, Hitler believed, would destroy more than 30 American and British divisions. He believed it would be the beginning of the end for the Allies. On the eve of December 15th, 250,000 Germans stood poised on the line of departure, prepared to annihilate the enemy. 5:30 a.m. the following morning. Flame erupted along an 85-mile front. Hitler's great drive to Antwerp had begun.
Soldiers of the 106th were pummeled by this massive artillery barrage. Numerous German tanks appeared and attacked. The division had no supporting tanks and just a few anti-tank guns. Terrified American officers took action by fleeing in jeeps, as 2 regiments were quickly surrounded while the 3rd managed to retreat. With no supplies or ability to fight tanks, most of the 106th Division surrendered after putting up a fight for 3 days. Senior Allied officers were in shock as symbols for the 106th Division were removed from their maps. This desperate German effort caused a huge bulge in the front lines as the Germans sought to cut off and trap the British Army in the north. The German offensive completely surprised the Allies, but it had little chance at success since the Allies had twice as many troops, endless supplies, and air and naval superiority. The Allies eventually drove the Germans back, but lost more tanks, more aircraft, and suffered more casualties. The Germans had no camps to place their thousands of new American POWs, so herded them around Germany, performing labor and scrounging for food. American soldiers who fought in this Battle of the Bulge have few fond memories of this experience, as seen in the writings of the most famous soldier from the 106th Division. Famous author Kurt Vonnegut was captured and ended up working in a factory in Dresden that made syrup. It was once a German meat packing plant, so was known as Slaughterhouse 5. He survived the massive Allied bombing of Dresden and was assigned to help collect the thousands of dead civilian bodies. He wrote the Germans did not expect Dresden to be bombed, so there were very few air raid shelters in a city with no war industries, just cigarette factories, hospitals, and clarinet factories. His book about this experience was titled Slaughterhouse 5 and became a bestseller in 1969. Vonnegut described searching for rubble for dead bodies as, quote, an elaborate Easter egg hunt.